The vector ships emerged from the darkness of space, their sleek hulls glinting in the distant sunlight. Earth's long-range sensors detected them first, massive vessels unlike anything humans had built. They approached slowly, deliberately, like predators sizing up prey. Admiral Hoon stood on the bridge of the EDF Sentinel, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays showing the alien fleet's position. After decades in Earth's defense forces, he had always known this day would come. First contact. But something about these ships made him uneasy. "Sir, they're broadcasting a message on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Kim, her fingers dancing across the communication panel. "Put it through," Hoon ordered. The screens flickered, revealing a tall, imposing figure. The alien had gray-blue skin stretched tight over sharp facial features. Golden armor adorned its shoulders and chest. When it spoke, its voice was deep, resonant, and somehow translated perfectly into English. "I am King Roll of the Vector Dominion. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance is unnecessary and would only bring suffering." Hoon exchanged glances with his officers. The message wasn't a greeting. It was a declaration of ownership. Within hours, Earth's leaders assembled an emergency response team. They selected Ambassador Jin, known for his calm demeanor and diplomatic skills, to make first official contact. The meeting was arranged in neutral space, aboard a station orbiting Jupiter. Jin approached the meeting with cautious optimism. "We must show them that humans seek peaceful coexistence," he told his team before boarding the shuttle. The meeting chamber on Jupiter Station was stark and utilitarian. King Rule entered flanked by guards, towering over the human delegation. He wore elaborate armor that seemed to ripple with its own internal light. "Your Majesty," Jin began, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "On behalf of Earth and all her colonies, I welcome you to our solar system. We hope this marks the beginning of a peaceful relationship between our peoples." Roll looked at Jin's outstretched hand with what could only be described as disdain. He did not reach out to complete the gesture. "Ambassador, the Vector do not relate to other species. We rule them. 17 worlds have already accepted our dominion. Your solar system will be the 18th. Jin maintained his composure. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Humans value our independence. We are open to trade, cultural exchange, even military alliance, but not subjugation." The alien king made a sound that might have been laughter. "You mistake this for a negotiation. It is merely an announcement." With that, Roll turned and left the chamber. The meeting had lasted less than 5 minutes. When Jin reported back to Earth's Defense Council, Admiral Hoon sighed heavily. "I've seen this before in human history. They think we're weak because we offered peace." "What do you recommend?" asked the council chair. "Prepare for war," Hoon replied simply, "and hope we're wrong." Earth's military mobilized quietly. Colony ships departing for Mars carried extra weapons and defensive systems disguised as mining equipment. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with basic shield technology. Old military bases on the moon, dormant for years, hummed back to life. 3 weeks passed in uneasy silence. Some began to hope the Vector had moved on to easier targets. Then came the attack. It began at dawn, Mars time. The Vector ships descended on the Red Planet's largest colony, Olympus City. Their weapons tore through the outer defensive shields with frightening ease. "Emergency transmission from Mars," shouted the communications officer on Earth's Defense Command. The screen showed chaos. Buildings collapsing, civilians running for shelter, the distinctive flash of alien weapons fire. "This is Colonel Jun at Olympus City. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Civilian casualties." The transmission cut off abruptly. Admiral Hoon stared at the blank screen. "They're testing us," he said quietly, "hitting a colony instead of Earth directly. They want to see how we respond." The Defense Council met immediately. Some argued for immediate retaliation, others for attempting communication. But Hoon had a different plan. The Vector expect us to either crumble or respond recklessly, he explained. Let's do neither. Over the next 72 hours, Earth implemented what would later be called the Hoon Doctrine. Instead of sending their main fleet to Mars, they activated the hidden defenses already in place. Simultaneously, they began evacuating Earth's major cities, moving key industries underground, and deploying their fleet in a defensive formation around Earth itself. On his command ship orbiting Mars, King Roll received reports of the colony's unexpectedly strong resistance. Your Majesty, they had hidden defensive emplacements, reported his general. Our first wave suffered significant losses. Insignificant, Roll corrected. Send the second wave. Crush them completely. But the second attack yielded similar results. What had appeared to be a vulnerable colony revealed layer after layer of defenses. Human ships emerged from hidden bases on Mars moons, engaging the Vector vessels from behind. On the colony surface, soldiers like Sergeant Min led civilian volunteers in guerrilla tactics against Vector ground forces. Min had been a mining engineer before the attack. Now he commanded a squad that used the colony's tunnel systems to ambush alien patrols. They're stronger than us, Min told his fighters, but they don't know the terrain. The battle for Mars stretched from days into weeks. The Vector, accustomed to quick victories, found themselves bogged down in a grinding conflict. Back on Earth, humanity's response continued to unfold. Old national rivalries were set aside. China shared advanced drone technology with American defense contractors. Russia opened its superbunkers to European refugees. Africa's quantum computing networks coordinated global defense systems. Admiral Hoon addressed the newly formed United Earth Defense Force. The Vector have conquered 17 worlds because those worlds stood alone. We stand together. In orbit around Mars, King Roll paced his command chamber. The walls displayed battle statistics that made little sense to him. The humans should have surrendered by now. Your Majesty, his advisor said carefully, perhaps we should withdraw and reassess. Roll's hand moved faster than anyone could follow. The advisor dropped to the floor, clutching his throat. The Vector do not retreat, Roll hissed. Bring my personal guard. I will lead the next assault myself. Down on the Mars surface, human defenders watched as a distinctive vessel descended toward Olympus City. Unlike the other Vector ships, this one gleamed with gold and silver ornamentation. That's got to be their leader, Min said, watching through binoculars from a hidden position. His second-in-command checked her weapons. Should we try to take him out? Min considered this. No. Admiral Hoon's orders were clear. We hold our positions and follow the plan. The plan was already working. The Vector, expecting to find a broken colony ready for conquest, instead encountered a unified resistance, unlike anything they had faced before. In his command throne, surveying the battles across Mars, King Roll felt something unfamiliar: doubt. These humans fought differently than other species. They retreated when necessary, struck from unexpected angles, and seemed to communicate with uncanny coordination. Primitive beings, Roll declared to his generals, hiding his uncertainty behind bravado. Their resistance only makes victory sweeter. But privately, he began to wonder if the 18th world might not fall as easily as the 17 before it. General Pack stood at attention before King Roll's throne, his posture perfect despite the deep ache in his back from the Mars campaign. 3 months had passed since the first attack on the human colonies, and what should have been a simple conquest had turned into a frustrating stalemate. Your Majesty, Pack said carefully, the humans adapt faster than anticipated. They learn from each battle. The war room around them displayed holographic maps of the solar system, with red markers showing Vector positions and blue showing human defenses. There were far more blue markers than there had been a month ago. Roll sat on his crystalline throne, one clawed hand tapping impatiently on the armrest. They delay the inevitable, he said, dismissing the warning with a wave. All species resist at first. All eventually kneel. General Pack had served in the conquest of 7 worlds. None had fought like the humans. He tried again. The Mars colony should have fallen in days. It still holds out. Our casualties increase weekly. Because you hesitate to use our full strength, Rull snapped. Perhaps I need generals with more courage. Pack knew what happened to generals who disappointed the king. He bowed his head. As you command, Your Majesty. On the far side of the solar system, Ambassador Jin had embarked on a dangerous mission. Using a small, unmarked ship with experimental stealth technology, he had slipped past vector patrols to reach the Luminar homeworld. The Luminar were one of the first species conquered by the Vector. Tall, translucent beings who communicated through patterns of light beneath their skin. They had been forced to serve as engineers in the Vector war machine for over 30 years. Jin was escorted through underground tunnels to meet with the Luminar Council of Light. Their chamber glowed with soft blue illumination that came from the council members themselves. "We have monitored your resistance," said the chief Luminar, his skin pulsing with speech patterns. "Most impressive, but ultimately futile. The Vector cannot be defeated." "We don't need to defeat them entirely," Jin replied. "We just need to make conquest too costly." He outlined Earth's strategy, a unified defense combining military resistance with diplomatic outreach to other conquered worlds. The Luminar listened silently. "What do you ask of us?" the chief finally said. "Your shield technology is superior to ours," Jin answered. "Help us improve our defenses." The Luminar conferred among themselves, their bodies flashing in rapid patterns unintelligible to human eyes. "To help you means death if discovered," the chief said. "But to watch another world fall means the death of hope." His skin glowed brighter. "We will help." Similar meetings happened across the conquered worlds. Earth's diplomats risked their lives to make contact with the Atrox, insectoid beings whose stealth drive technology was unmatched, the Marin, who had developed weapons that could penetrate Vector armor, and the Bolivi, whose predictive algorithms could anticipate Vector attack patterns. Each species had reasons to resist helping humans. Each ultimately agreed, seeing in Earth's resistance a possibility they had abandoned long ago. Back on Earth, the knowledge gained from these alliances transformed human defenses. In underwater facilities beneath Earth's oceans, in lunar caves, and in asteroid bases, engineers worked to incorporate alien technology with human systems. Director Kang oversaw the largest shipyard, hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. She moved through the facility, watching as workers assembled new vessels unlike anything humans had built before. "The Luminar shields need to interface directly with our power systems," she told her chief engineer. "Their technology is based on principles we're still trying to understand." The engineer, an exhausted woman who had slept maybe 10 hours in the past week, nodded. "We're learning as we go. Each ship is better than the last." Kang patted her shoulder. "Keep going. These ships will be ready when Saturn needs them." Saturn would need them sooner than anyone expected. Frustrated by the continued resistance on Mars, King Rull ordered a major offensive against human settlements on Saturn's moons. The gas giant's resources were vital to Earth's war effort, and the king believed striking there would force humanity to divide their defenses. The attack began at what Earth forces called Vector Dawn. The aliens preferred to launch offensives at specific intervals that aligned with their homeworld cycles. Human commanders had identified this pattern weeks ago. When the Vector fleet arrived at Titan, Saturn's largest moon, they expected minimal resistance. Instead, they found a defense system that seemed specifically designed to counter their tactics. Commander Yoon stood on the bridge of the EDF Indomitable, watching as his squadron engaged the surprised Vector ships. His vessel incorporated luminar shields that flashed bright blue when hit by Vector weapons, absorbing energy rather than simply blocking it. "They're adjusting their weapon frequencies," his tactical officer reported. "Shield efficiency dropping to 82%. Yoon nodded. "Activate the Atrox modifications." The human fleet seemed to flicker and shift position, the stealth technology confusing Vector targeting systems. Their return fire struck with uncanny precision, guided by Bolivi targeting algorithms. On the lead vector vessel, Sub-Commander Tao watched in growing confusion as human ships vanished and reappeared in their sensors. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Their technology was primitive just months ago." The battle for Saturn's moons lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Vector had been pushed back for the first time in the war. 5 of their cruisers were destroyed. 7 more damaged badly enough to retreat. The news reached King Roll during his war council. He listened to the report in silence, his face betraying nothing. When the messenger finished, the room fell quiet, generals exchanging nervous glances. Roll rose from his seat, moving to the holographic display of the solar system. "Interesting," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "They have teeth after all." General Pack studied his king's face. "Your Majesty, we should reevaluate our strategy. The humans have acquired technology they should not have." "Yes," Roll agreed. "They have made alliances with our subjects." His hand closed into a fist. "A problem to be addressed once Earth falls. But perhaps we should consolidate our forces, strengthen our position in the outer system before." Roll cut him off. "No more delays. No more probing attacks." He turned to face his generals, his eyes burning with intensity. "Bring the royal fleet. All of it. I will lead the assault on their homeworld myself." The generals looked stunned. The royal fleet had not been fully deployed in a single campaign for over 50 years. "Your Majesty," Pack said carefully, "is that necessary? The risk to yourself is nothing compared to the risk of appearing weak." Roll finished. 17 worlds watch this conflict. If humans can resist, others might think they can as well. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I will not lose the 18th world." As orders went out across the Vector fleet, Admiral Hoon received the intelligence from Earth's spy network. He gathered his command staff aboard the EDF Sentinel. "The Vector are massing their forces," he told them, pointing to the display showing enemy movements, "including ships we haven't seen before. They're preparing for a major offensive against Earth itself." Commander Sue, recently returned from the Saturn campaign, looked concerned. "Are our defenses ready?" Hoon's expression remained calm. "No, but they won't be any more ready next week or next month. We always knew this moment would come." He brought up a new display, showing a complex series of positions around Earth and its moon. "Operation Moonfall is now active," he said. "All ships, all stations. This is what we've been preparing for." As the human defenses moved into their final positions, deep in Vector territory, the conquered worlds watched and waited. Small acts of sabotage began to occur. Minor malfunctions in Vector systems, delayed shipments, corrupted data. Nothing that would draw immediate retaliation, but enough to show that the winds of change were beginning to blow. The final confrontation for Earth was about to begin. The Vector Royal Fleet emerged from hyperspace in waves, thousands of ships appearing around Earth's orbit like a swarm of deadly insects. They moved with perfect precision, arranging themselves into the famous spear formation that had broken the defenses of 17 worlds before Earth. King Roll stood on the command deck of his flagship, the inevitable Conquest. The massive vessel dwarfed all others in his fleet, its hull decorated with trophies from previous conquests. The king wore his full battle armor, golden plates interlocking over his tall frame, a cape of shimmering material flowing behind him. "Display Earth's defenses," he commanded. The holographic projection showed human ships and stations positioned primarily around their moon, Luna. Roll studied the formation with experienced eyes. "Primitive," he commented. "They concentrate their forces at a single point." General Pack, standing behind his king, felt a flicker of unease. The human deployment seemed too obvious, too flawed for a species that had proven itself cunning. "Your Majesty, perhaps." "The attack begins now," Roll interrupted. "Drive directly through their center. I want Earth's cities in bombardment range by day's end." The Vector fleet moved forward, weapons charging. The front sections of the formation approached Luna Station, the largest human defensive position, expecting it to fire immediately. Instead, the station remained silent, its weapons dormant. On Luna Station's command center, Commander Sung watched the enemy approach. She was younger than most officers of her rank, promoted rapidly after displaying exceptional tactical ability during the Mars defense. Now, the fate of Earth rested largely on her shoulders. "They're in range," reported her tactical officer. "All ships report ready." Sung nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. "Wait," she ordered. "Let them commit fully." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The Vector fleet grew larger on their screens, weapons visibly charged. "Commander," the tactical officer said, tension in his voice. "They'll fire any second." Sung raised her hand. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now. Activate quantum displacement. Throughout the human fleet, and on Luna Station itself, engineers activated the devices that Earth's scientists had developed with help from the Luminar and other allied species. These devices didn't simply generate shields or fire weapons. They bent space itself in localized pockets. The effect was immediate and disorienting. From the Vector perspective, the human fleet seemed to simultaneously disappear and multiply. Where one ship had been, 3 now appeared. Where Luna Station had stood alone, now a cluster of identical stations existed. On the inevitable conquest, alarms blared as sensors failed to make sense of what they were detecting. "What is happening?" Rull demanded, watching as the orderly projection of the battlefield dissolved into chaos. "Unknown technology, Your Majesty," a science officer replied, frantically adjusting controls. "It's affecting our sensor systems and space itself around their fleet." "Impossible," Rull growled. "No species has such capability." Before anyone could respond, the human attack began. Ships that seemed to blink in and out of normal space opened fire from unexpected vectors. Luna Station, or rather what appeared to be multiple Luna Stations, launched waves of smaller craft that swarmed toward the confused Vector formation. Commander Sung stood calmly amid the controlled chaos of her command center, issuing orders with quiet confidence. "Battle Group Alpha, target their left flank vessels. Beta, strike at their engineering sections. Gamma, prepare boarding parties for the primary target." The quantum displacement fields did more than confuse the enemy. They allowed human ships to make short jumps through folded space, appearing where the Vector least expected them. A tactic impossible before their alliance with the conquered species who had secretly developed this technology over decades of Vector rule. On the inevitable conquest, King Rull watched in growing rage as his perfect formation disintegrated. Vector ships, unable to determine which targets were real and which were displacement phantoms, fired ineffectively, or worse, at each other. "Your Majesty," General Pack said urgently, "we must withdraw and regroup." "No." Rull slammed his fist on the command console. "The Vector do not retreat. Bring us closer to that station. We will destroy it ourselves." The massive royal flagship pushed forward, its superior weapons capable of devastating Luna Station if it could get a clear shot. But as it advanced, multiple human vessels converged on it from seemingly impossible angles. Commander Sung watched the royal flagship's approach on her tactical display. "Phase 2, she ordered. "Target the flagship's propulsion and weapons. Boarding teams, stand ready." The human vessels concentrated fire on specific points of the inevitable conquest, not trying to destroy it, but to disable key systems. Precision strikes guided by intelligence provided by the Atrox, who had helped build many Vector vessels during their subjugation. On the flagship's bridge, systems failed in cascading sequence. First weapons, then engines, then communications. Emergency lighting bathed the command deck in red. "Your Majesty," a security officer reported, "human vessels are attaching to our hull. Multiple breaches detected." Rull drew his ceremonial blade, its edge glowing with energy. "Let them come. No human will set foot on this bridge while I live." But the humans didn't target the bridge, not immediately. Following Commander Sung's careful plan, they seized engineering sections first, then life support, then internal defenses. They moved in practiced formations, using Bolivy prediction algorithms to anticipate vector counterattacks. General Pack organized the flagship's defenders, trying to contain the multiple breaches. "We need to get the king to an escape vessel," he told his security team. Roll overheard. "I will not flee." "Your Majesty, you must. The Empire needs its king." Before Roll could respond, the bridge doors exploded inward. Human soldiers in powered armor rushed through, weapons ready. Behind them walked Commander Sung herself, her armor distinguished by command insignia. "King Roll," she called out, her voice amplified by her helmet. "Your ship is taken. Your fleet is in disarray. Surrender." The Vector bridge crew looked to their king, awaiting orders. Roll raised his blade. "The Vector do not surrender," he snarled. Sung tilted her head. "Look around you. Your ship is lost. Your options are limited." Roll's officers exchanged glances. General Pack stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we're surrounded. We cannot win this battle." For the first time in his long reign, Roll faced the possibility of defeat, of capture. His blade wavered slightly. "I'd rather die," he declared. Commander Sung approached, seemingly unconcerned by the deadly weapon in the king's hands. From her armor, she produced a small device. "That's not an option we're offering," she said calmly. The device in her hand activated, sending out a field of neural restraint technology, another gift from the Luminar. Roll found his limbs suddenly heavy, unresponsive. His blade clattered to the deck. "What have you done to me?" he managed to say as the neural restraints secured his massive form. "Ensured your survival," Sung replied. "You're far more valuable alive than dead." Human soldiers moved forward, securing the bridge and the stunned Vector officers. None resisted after seeing their king subdued. Within hours, news of the unthinkable spread through human communications, and more importantly, through the secret networks maintained by the conquered species. King Roll, the conqueror of 17 worlds, had been captured. Images, carefully selected by Earth's leadership, showed the restrained king being transferred to a secure human facility on Luna. On distant worlds across the galaxy, beings who had lived under Vector rule for generations received the news with shock, then cautious hope. On Luminar, the Council of Light gathered in their hidden chamber, their bodies pulsing with excited patterns. "It has begun," the chief said. "The impossible has happened." On the Atrox homeworld, resistance leaders emerged from hiding for the first time in decades. Their mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among their kind. The Boliviseers gathered around their probability pools, watching as the future, once so fixed, so certain, began to shift before their eyes. And on 17 conquered worlds, beings of all kinds looked up at the stars with a feeling many had forgotten: possibility. Back on Luna Station, Commander Sung transmitted a simple message to Earth: "Operation Moonfall complete. The king is secured. Awaiting further instructions." The response came directly from Admiral Hoon. "Well done, Commander. Prepare for Phase 4. History waits for no one." The turning point had come. The war was not over, but its course had changed irrevocably. The Earth Council gathered in their underground chamber beneath the rebuilt United Nations complex in Geneva. 24 representatives from Earth's regions sat around a circular table, their faces grave despite the recent victory. Admiral Hoon and Commander Sung stood before them, waiting as the council members reviewed the reports from the Battle of Luna. "The question before us," said Council Chair Lee, "is what to do with King Roll." General Tai, who represented Earth's combined military forces on the council, leaned forward. His uniform bore the scars of early battles against the Vector. "We could execute him," Ta suggested, his voice matter-of-fact. "It would show the galaxy that humans cannot be conquered without consequences." Murmurs spread around the table. Some nodded in agreement, but others looked troubled. "No," responded Chair Lee after the whispers died down. "Death makes martyrs. We need something more effective. A holographic display activated in the center of the table, showing the captured Vector King in his cell on Luna Station. Roll sat motionless, his once imposing frame still regal despite his captivity. The Vector system is built on strength, Commander Sung explained. Their whole empire functions because other species fear them, and because Vector themselves fear showing weakness. Ambassador Jin, recently returned from another secret mission to allied species, nodded in agreement. The 17 conquered worlds all tell us the same thing. Vector power relies on projection, on appearance. Break that appearance, and we break their control, finished Admiral Hoon. Chair Li looked thoughtful. What exactly are you suggesting? Hoon glanced at Sung, who activated another holographic display. This one showed a transparent vehicle, similar to the Pope mobiles of centuries past. We show King Roll to the galaxy, Sung said. Not as a prisoner in chains, not tortured or executed, but simply visible, contained, powerless but unharmed. The council debated through the night. Some argue for harsher treatment, others for more lenient approaches, but by morning they had reached a decision. 3 days later, King Roll was transferred from Luna Station to Earth under heavy guard. He had spoken little since his capture, responding to questions with stony silence. Now, as human guards escorted him to the transparent containment vehicle, he finally spoke. You should kill me, he told Commander Sung, who supervised the transfer. It would be more merciful. Sung studied the alien king. Despite everything, she couldn't help but respect his composure. This isn't about mercy, she replied, or cruelty. It's about ending a war and preventing the next one. Roll's eyes narrowed. My people will never surrender. They will come for me. We're counting on them watching. Sung said. That's the point. The containment vehicle was a marvel of human and alien technology. Its transparent walls were stronger than steel yet crystal clear. Environmental systems inside maintained perfect conditions for Vector physiology. Neural dampeners prevented Roll from using his considerable strength to escape, but caused no pain or discomfort. The tour began in New Beijing, the most populous city on Earth. Millions lined the streets as the vehicle proceeded slowly down the main boulevard. Roll sat inside, his posture rigid, staring straight ahead. He refused to acknowledge the crowds, maintaining what dignity he could. Screens throughout the city magnified his image. Photographers and video operators captured every moment. But most importantly, the entire procession was broadcast via captured Vector communication systems to every world in their empire. On the Vector homeworld, Supreme General Mach watched in horror as his king was displayed like an exhibit. Around him, other high-ranking officials stared at the screens in stunned silence. We must attack immediately, one commander insisted. Destroy their planet entirely. General Mach raised a hand for silence. And risk killing the king. No, we need time to consider our options. But time was something the Vector High Command suddenly found in short supply. As the parade continued from New Beijing to Sydney, disturbing reports began arriving from the outer territories. On the mining world of Talax, Vector overseers had been peacefully surrounded by Talaxian workers and asked to leave. On Bolivia Prime, prediction centers simply shut down, their operators vanishing overnight. 3 Vector cruisers near the Luminar homeworld reported critical system failures before going silent. The Empire was responding to the images of their captured king, not with unified rage as might have been expected, but with calculated resistance. In Sydney, enormous crowds gathered along the harbor to watch the procession. Roll remained stoic, though human observers noted signs of growing fatigue in his posture. Between cities, Ambassador Jin visited the king in a secure facility. You won't break me, Roll told him. This parade accomplishes nothing. Jin set a tablet before the king, displaying reports from across the Vector Empire. It's already accomplishing everything we hoped for. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Roll's features. The parade continued to Nairobi, where the containment vehicle passed through streets lined with people who had suffered directly during the early Vector attacks. Many had lost homes or family members, yet there was no violence, no thrown objects, no attempts to harm the alien king. This calculated restraint confused Roll more than any aggression would have. He had expected humans to behave like Vector, to torture defeated enemies, to extract revenge. Their mercy seemed incomprehensible, almost offensive. A young woman stepped forward from the Nairobi crowd, placing her hand against the transparent wall. Roll recognized her from intelligence briefings. Dr. Han, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, whose research facility had been specifically targeted during the first wave. "I studied your people," she said, knowing he could hear her through the vehicle systems. "I wanted to understand you, not destroy you. That's the difference between us." Roll turned away, but her words lingered. By the time the parade reached Rio de Janeiro, the Vector Empire was showing serious signs of fracture. 3 governors of outer territories had already contacted Earth directly, seeking separate peace agreements. The Atrox and Luminar had launched open rebellions, using technology they had hidden for decades. Inside his containment unit, Roll received regular updates on these developments. Human psychologists had advised that knowing the consequences of his capture would be more effective than keeping him ignorant. As the vehicle moved through Rio's colorful streets, Roll finally asked to speak with human leadership. Admiral Hoon arrived within the hour. "Your parade has had its effect," Roll said, his voice strained but dignified. "What terms do you offer to end this spectacle?" Hoon studied the king carefully. The immediate independence of all 17 worlds under Vector control. A non-aggression pact lasting 100 years. Reparations to species who suffered under your rule. Roll's facial ridges darkened, the Vector equivalent of a flush of anger. "You would destroy everything we've built over centuries." "No," Hoon corrected. "We would transform it. The Vector can be part of the galaxy without controlling it." The conversation ended without resolution, but human leaders noted the significant change. Roll was now willing to discuss terms, something unthinkable just days before. On distant Vector worlds, governors began questioning their allegiance as they watched their king reduced to a spectacle. Military commanders, seeing their supreme leader contained but treated with technical dignity, found themselves confused about how to respond. The Vector had always believed strength was everything. Their entire cultural identity was built around domination. Yet here were humans, showing a different kind of strength. The strength to capture but not kill, to parade but not torture, to win but not annihilate. In the Vector High Command, debates grew heated. "We should destroy ourselves rather than accept such humiliation," insisted one admiral. "And what would that accomplish?" countered General Mock. "Our king lives. Our people need leadership now, not martyrdom." Meanwhile, the human parade concluded in Washington, D.C., where the containment vehicle was placed on the National Mall for a single day. Millions filed past to see the alien king who had nearly conquered Earth. Roll sat straight-backed, maintaining his dignity despite it all. But when a group of human children approached, placing drawings on the transparent wall, colorful images showing humans and Vector standing together peacefully, something in his expression changed. That evening, he requested another meeting with Earth's leaders. "Your parade has made its point," he said when they gathered. "I am prepared to discuss terms for the Vector's future role in the galaxy." Admiral Hoon nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the victory these words represented. "We'll begin immediately," he said. "And King Roll, the parade ends now. You have my word." The fight wasn't over, but the path to peace had been laid. Not through superior weapons or brutal tactics, but through a parade that showed the galaxy a new kind of strength. The surrender came 3 days after the parade reached New York. Admiral Hoon received the transmission in the Earth Defense Force headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains. The message was brief, direct, and historically unprecedented. The Vector High Command requested terms for complete cessation of hostilities. "They're actually surrendering," whispered Commander Sung, who stood at Hoon's side as the message appeared on the main screen. Hoon's weathered face remained impassive, though the slight tremor in his hand betrayed his emotion. Inform the Council immediately. We need to move quickly. Within hours, the Earth Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all human territories gathered around the circular table, joined by holographic projections of Mars and Saturn colony leaders. After brief discussion, they drafted the terms of surrender. Ambassador Jin, as Earth's chief diplomat, was chosen to deliver these terms to the Vector representatives. The meeting took place on neutral ground, an abandoned space station at the edge of the solar system, once used for deep space research. Jin arrived with a small delegation that included Commander Sung and 2 military advisors. The Vector delegation was led by General Mok, who had assumed temporary leadership of their forces after Roll's capture. 4 other Vector officials accompanied him, their usually proud postures noticeably subdued. We are prepared to discuss terms, General Mok stated without preamble when they gathered around the station's conference table. Jin nodded and activated a holographic display between them. These are Earth's conditions. The first condition appeared, glowing in both human and Vector script. Release all conquered worlds. Dismantle your empire. Mok's facial ridges darkened, but he said nothing as the remaining terms appeared. All Vector military forces will withdraw to within 10 light-years of the Vector homeworld. Reparations will be paid to all formerly conquered species, determined by a neutral commission. Technology forcibly taken from subjugated worlds will be returned. King Roll will be returned to the Vector homeworld after these terms are implemented. When the list was complete, Mok looked directly at Jin. You realize that this ends centuries of Vector history. Our entire society is built on expansion. Then you will build something new, Jin replied simply. The negotiations lasted 18 hours. The Vector delegates argued passionately for modifications to certain terms, particularly regarding military restrictions and reparations. Earth's representatives remained firm on core principles but showed flexibility on implementation timelines. The landing ceremony was subdued. The Vector High Command received their king with formal dignity, but gone were the elaborate displays of dominance and power that had once characterized such events. Ordinary Vector citizens watched from a distance, their reactions mixed. As Roll prepared to disembark, he turned to Commander Sung. Your parade accomplished what 1,000 battles could not. You changed us without destroying us. Sung offered a small smile. That was always the goal, Your Majesty. The transformation of Vector society did not happen overnight. Conservative factions resisted the changes, arguing for a return to their imperial past. But under Roll's unexpected leadership, reform movements gained strength. The king who had once led conquests now led his people toward a different future. 5 years after the Battle of Luna Station, a historic event took place on Earth. A Vector diplomatic vessel landed in Geneva, carrying General Pak, now Ambassador Pak, as the first official Vector representative to the Galactic Coalition headquarters. As he walked through streets that had once displayed his captured king, Pak was met not with hostility but with curious interest. Human media covered his arrival extensively, focusing on the broader implications for galactic peace rather than past conflicts. During a public address at the Coalition Assembly, Pak spoke candidly about the transformation his people had undergone. They could have destroyed us, he remarked, his voice carrying through the chamber. Their weapons were capable, their position after our defeat absolute. Instead, they taught us something we never understood. True strength lies not in domination, but in knowing when to show restraint. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Representatives of dozens of species, including many who had once suffered under Vector rule, acknowledging the difficult journey toward reconciliation. That evening, at a private reception, Ambassador Jin approached Pak with a glass of blue Vector ceremonial liquid. To new beginnings, Jin proposed. Pak inclined his head, and to lessons learned at great cost. They stood together by the window, looking out at the lights of Geneva, where humans and visitors from across the galaxy moved freely through the streets. Neither mentioned the past directly, but both understood the significance of this moment. Former enemies standing side by side, planning for a shared future. In a museum nearby, a small exhibition had opened that day. It contained the transparent vehicle that had once carried King Roll through Earth's cities. A simple plaque beside it read, "Sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying an enemy, but from transforming them into a friend." Children, human and alien, pressed their faces against the glass, struggling to imagine a time when the galaxy had been divided by war rather than united in peace.